Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Altcoin Analysis, Episode 2. Today we're going to be looking at one of the larger coins. Last time we were looking at Tezos. This week we're going to be looking at EOS. EOS has been a coin that, obviously, one of the most popular coins, one of the largest coins. I believe it's number 7 on CoinMarketCap. So very, I would say, important and pivotal as far as crypto is concerned currently, obviously having as much market cap as it has. And so I figured I would make a little bit of a fundamental analysis video that goes over just a few of the things that I have learned about EOS. I initially had a little bit of knowledge before based on what I knew about EOS, and I decided to update some of that for this video. And as it turns out, there is not much terribly to be updated, but we'll get into that. So EOS. I actually have no idea what the EOS is actually supposed to stand for. On one hand, I've heard Earth Operating System, which is pretty self-aggrandizing. And I've also heard Ethereum on steroids, which is a little bit funnier and probably more correct, I suppose, with the intention of what EOS is meant to be. But so far, I've yet to see any official documentation on what EOS actually is supposed to stand for. Maybe it just means Eos. I think Eos is some Greek god of the dawn or something like that. So I don't really know what that has to do with blockchain. Ethereum on steroids, probably a little bit more relevant. So, I'm going to go into EOS. All right, so the history of EOS is pretty basic, actually. And I did include this chart in my Tezos video as well. So this, and I'll get to the chart. But first, they did their beta net in 2017 by Dan Larimer. If you don't know who Dan Larimer is someone who is, I would say, is pretty prolific in the crypto ecosystem, particularly for creating projects that are, I would say, at the very least unique. I don't know if they are particularly valuable, and we'll get to one of those EOS in this video, but they are certainly unique. They are certainly trying to tackle problems in different kind of ways. Some of the projects that he's worked on include BitShares. He's worked on Steem. Now he's doing this EOS thing. I'm not entirely sure if he's working on anything else in the future, but from the historical activity, if there's ever a Larimer ICO or a pre-sale, I want to get in on the ground floor of that, because it's usually going to be a lot of money for you if you do, just because Larimer has a lot of star power in the crypto community. So they had a year-long ICO, EOS. They launched their ICO in the end of 2017, and their idea for an ICO was a little bit different. Usually an ICO will sell a set amount of tokens, and once those tokens are sold, that's it. That's the end of the ICO. Then distribution comes maybe months, years later down the line. With EOS, it was a little bit different. What they tried to do was they had their idea on this, and I don't know if I agree necessarily, but their idea on this was, we want to prevent market volatility with people dumping tokens day one. So what we're going to do is we're going to sell tokens over a year, and we're going to sell a bunch of tokens over time. And their initial raise, what they were asking for initially, was $1 billion with a B, which is a hell of a lot of money. I have no idea what you can use $1 billion on besides like curing cancer or something. But they wanted $1 billion for a blockchain. There it is. There you go. But what ended up happening was they raised $4 billion, 4 times as much throughout that year-long ICO process. So there was a lot of hype around this, and I couldn't really understand why at the time. And there was a lot of good price speculation and price action following it, certainly for a project that was this large at an ICO stage. But I never really understood why. And we'll get to a few of those facts a little bit later. But so this is the chart. Again, I showed this in the Tezos video. This is the EOS, obviously all the way at the right here, $4 billion. They have raised, I believe they are the largest ICO ever. And I don't think there's been a bigger one. No, I don't think there's been a bigger one. Maybe the Libra ICO will be bigger, if you can call it an ICO. But yeah, EOS certainly leaps and bounds ahead of the competition in terms of the amount of money that they've been able to gather and the amount of resources that they have been able to amass and accrue because of that hype and because of that money. So $4 billion, I mean, you got to think about that. You can build a hell of a lot of stuff on $4 billion. Again, we're seeing Tezos $200 million. They were only asking for $20 million. Filecoin $250 million. Quite a unique proposition and proposal. But they raised $250 million. Bancor $150 million. I'm not too convinced on the fundamentals of Bancor, but again, for what they were trying to build, pretty complex. They only needed 150 million, and yeah, 150 billion. But EOS raising 4 billion USD, quite a lot of money. And a large reason for that is their ICO was essentially uncapped, so you could buy as much as you want as the price went up of the tokens throughout the sale. And there were a lot of people doing arbitrage on exchanges. So what they would do is they would buy crowd sale tokens from the EOS platform, the website, and then they would sell those tokens instantly for a profit, which again added to the amount of money that EOS was raising essentially, which I don't know if that was engineered by Larimer and friends, but certainly it is a very ingenious way of raising a lot more money, of doing this little arbitrage scheme. So here's the price chart of EOS. It is kind of a tragedy. This kind of reminds me of the opposite of the Binance chart, where if you just take the Binance chart and you flip it upside down, it kind of looks like this EOS chart. And usually, small caveat here, small aside, I am more of a Bitcoin trader. I generally trade on the Bitcoin pair because I just feel like if you're in crypto, you have two options. You can either trade on Bitcoin, so you can hold Bitcoin, or you can hold an altcoin. If you're holding an altcoin, you're probably holding it to try and make more Bitcoin. I've made a video on this previously. So I'm always looking at the Bitcoin pair. I'm never really looking at the USD. Certainly the USD is valuable for things like market cap and figuring out where a coin is placed in terms of that market cap and how competitive it is. But really it's more of the Bitcoin pair that we as crypto traders, as people who understand the value of Bitcoin itself, look at it. So we're always trying to beat Bitcoin with the amount of returns that it can generate. So here's the Bitcoin chart. That's the orange. Green is obviously the USD. And so it's been pretty tumultuous. For the first year or so of release, it was actually unbelievably, I would say pretty damn bullish. We had that dip, obviously, that went down. Everyone thought EOS was wrecked, myself included, by the way. I thought it was done. I thought it was over for EOS. But even back then, I believe their market cap was pretty insane, something like $1 billion, which really just goes to show you how large this project is and the scope of the amount of money that they raised. But then it started having this run in January, in March, all the way through May and July in 2018. And this was one of the few coins, really, during that bear season, because we did have a bearish alt season from about January 2018 all the way to July. EOS was one of the coins that didn't do that, which was strange. And this was mainly due to the timing of the mainnet. So what they did with the ICO was they released ERC20 tokens, EOS tokens that you could trade on Ethereum. These were obviously testnet tokens, but you could trade them for mainnet tokens once the mainnet came out. And the mainnet came out around, you guessed it, around the top here of the price charts. So, but ever since then, usually, so there's two phases of a project. The first phase is the speculation hype phase, and then the second phase is the mainnet, oh shit, we have to deliver something phase. So we've had the speculation hype phase, and now that is essentially over. Now we're in the oh shit, we have to build something phase. And you can see the price reflecting that it doesn't really look like there's much being built here. So we'll get more on that later. So that's the price chart. It's pretty bottomy right now, I would say. Or not. I don't know. It looks pretty bad, actually. Features. So a few of the features of EOS. What makes EOS important? Why is it good, or why is it interesting? So it is an Ethereum competitor. If you don't know, there's a lot of Ethereum competitors on the market. Projects that try to beat Ethereum or otherwise try to improve upon Ethereum in one way or the other. With Ethereum, there was a lot of push towards, and this is the EOS argument, so I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here, but with Ethereum, there was a large push towards decentralization, the decentralized aspect of building a dApp and then having it be immutable, code is law, all of that rhetoric. With EOS instead, Dan Larimer and his team, Block One, the company behind EOS, their push was a lot more towards the scalability aspect. And they said, well, you can either have it be decentralized or you can have it be fast. So there's usually a trifecta. You can have it be secure, you can have it be fast, or you can have it be decentralized. You got to pick two generally. Or instead of secure, it's cheap. So it's cheap, decentralized, or fast. So you have to pick two of three. So EOS's main advantage here is that they're trying to go a lot more for the scalability aspect, pushing that TPS, pushing those transactions per second. So EOS, Ethereum competitor. Features. They have half-second block times. With Ethereum instead, it's obviously a lot slower. Their block times are something like every I think Ethereum blocks are every 10 seconds or every 30 seconds, something like that. With EOS, it's much, much faster. It's actually every 0.5 seconds. So every second, you're getting two brand new blocks. Every half second is great. Which the way that they work is with EOS block producers rather than everybody doing proof of work. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But basically what that means is you get 2-block finality. And finality essentially means that you can trust a transaction. So a transaction that takes place on Bitcoin, sure, you might be able to trust something that has only one confirmation, but you can't trust it fully. You actually usually need to wait maybe 3, 4, or 5 confirmations, because as there are more blocks that sign that previous transaction, you can be sure that there's a lot more proof of work behind it and a lot more security. So that's what we mean when we talk about finality. With EOS, it's 2-block finality, which means after 2 blocks, which is 1 second, you can be damn sure, 99% sure that your transaction hasn't been tampered with. You can trust it. It's safe. If someone sends you $5,000 for a watch on EOS, after just 1 second, you can trust that you have that money. There's nothing that can happen to where that transaction will in the future become unresolved or reorganized or anything like that. It has good finality in this case. It has feeless transactions, and I put the quotations here sort of. The way the feeless transactions work, or the transactions on EOS function, is that you don't actually pay for any transactions initially, but the way that you do it, but you do need to purchase EOS tokens in order to own a certain bandwidth out of the total EOS network. So if I want to send some money to Bob, I need to first purchase EOS, and then I need to stake that EOS so that I have a stake in the system. And then once I have a stake in the system, I will receive a proportion of the bandwidth in that system so that I can send money for free. Once I'm done sending all of my money, I can unstake my tokens and I can sell them on the market if I want. So in this way, I get feeless transactions because I'm paying for them in advance, but I'm actually not really paying for them because I get my EOS back at the end of the day. So you're kind of paying for them, you're kind of not, which is, it's interesting. It's certainly, over time, I would say this is definitely a cheaper alternative than something like Ethereum, where you are paying for every single transaction. But again, this is something that is largely untested. We really need to see under something like a stress test how EOS actually handles and how much it actually costs to be able to send a bunch of transactions. Obviously, with Ethereum, if you have an Ethereum address, you need to have a certain amount of Ethereum for the gas, which is a certain level. So usually maybe $10 to $20 is probably going to last you 6 months to a year of just constantly sending transactions back and forth. With EOS, it's a lot harder to be able to accurately judge how much you'll need. On top of that, there's the whole staking aspect to keep in mind, which adds another element to the game. So another feature of it is the high scalability and throughput. I've mentioned this before. Because of the EOS, the way it works, and I'll get to this in the next bullet point here, but the way it works is it gives you a lot more scalability and throughput. So I think the EOS maximum TPS is something like 4,000 TPS, which is pretty insane compared to Ethereum and Bitcoin. Bitcoin's TPS obviously very low. I think Bitcoin's TPS is something like 7, and Ethereum's is something like 14. So transactions per second, very, very low. With EOS, much, much faster. What is that? 2 magnitudes higher almost. So, and then finally, the final feature of EOS is the delegated proof of stake consensus mechanism. So this one it's a little difficult to explain, but I will try to explain this in simple terms. Basically, how it works is, actually, it's not too difficult to explain. Basically, there's the amount of tokens you have on the EOS network. The amount of EOS you have is basically proportional to the vote you have. And so if you have a large vote, you can just vote for yourself as a block producer. And there's only 21 block producers at any individual time. And a block producer, what they do is they obviously produce the block, as the name suggests. So unlike Bitcoin, where you can just fire up an ASIC and you can be a block producer as long as you get lucky and you get the block reward. With EOS, there's people vote, and you can vote yourself. With even just one EOS, you can actually vote. Your vote's going to be very small, but you can vote. You can vote for an individual or a node or whoever you want to be as a block producer, and then that person produces a block. And in this way, it's delegated because you're moving the proof of work almost, in a sense, to these delegated block producers, which means that you can get all of the features that I mentioned before. So you get the 2-block finality, you get the feeless transactions, sort of, you get the half-second block times, and you get the high throughput. So that's the way that works. Now, positives. So the positives of EOS. I tried to search far and wide for these guys. Positives of EOS, because you'll see what I think about, am I bearish or bullish on this, but I think you guys are starting to get an idea on this. So positives. So there's Everpedia, which is this nice Wikipedia that's built on EOS. Now, I don't really know why a Wikipedia on EOS is relevant, but I think it's a neat project. So great. I think it's cool. At least we have some kind of app on EOS. I don't really know what the usage is like. I was looking around on the Everpedia site. Some of the articles, well, most of the articles actually only have something like a few hundred views. So obviously not a lot of market traction for that. But it's pretty nice that they have something. They have an actual app. They can show something. Hey, we built this thing. Another positive, the fast transactions allows devs to build whatever they wish. So this one is obviously very important for a developer. If you have an application that needs to have very high TPS, you simply cannot run this on Ethereum. You can't. So here's a quick example. We had a FOMO 3D. And FOMO 3D was an Ethereum app, and it was a game that everyone could send their money into to try to win this huge pot, which grew all the time. And what some particularly intelligent individuals did, and this is how they won the game, is they ended up filling the entire mempool of several Ethereum blocks in a row with all of these fake transactions, so that they won with the one true transaction, which was their submission to be the last person buying into the FOMO 3D smart contract. And so FOMO 3D awarded something like, I think it was well over $1 million to that person who managed to figure out this little trick. On EOS, that really can't happen because there's much faster TX, which means you have a much higher transaction speeds, transaction output, which means you have to fill up every single block with so many false transactions. On top of that, you actually have to purchase EOS tokens proportional to the amount of transactions you plan on flooding the network with. So probably a lot more expensive to do an attack like that on EOS. If you can call it an attack, it's more of an exploit. So it's good for developers because you can develop something like FOMO 3D. Now you have a different option other than Ethereum. You actually have something like EOS. Maybe EOS is right for you if you're looking for that fast TX. Third awesome positive for EOS, they have so much money. They have a huge, huge war chest, guys. They have billions of dollars. I mean, like I said, unless you're curing cancer with this thing, I have absolutely no idea what possible things it could be building with that requires that much money. But they have that much money. They can pretty much build on EOS in perpetuity. Block 1 is unbelievably rich. Larimer is super rich. I really wish I got into the pre-sale of this thing, guys, because it did make a lot of money, even for people who bought during ICO. So there you have it. And obviously, Larimer is very well known in the crypto ecosystem, so he has a lot of star power. The fact that he's behind this thing is obviously a great positive. If Dan Larimer pops up in your emails or your Gmails and he says, hey, you want to build something on EOS, you're probably going to be like, yeah, sure, let's do it. So, negatives. It is extremely, extremely centralized. The way that the block producers work, again, I'm sure you see the flaws in it. The amount of tokens you have means that you have more power over the network. This is kind of a rich get richer scheme, right? So if you have 10% of the EOS tokens, then you control 10% of the network. Then you can also give yourself block producing capability for that 10%, which is hard on people who are looking for a decentralized option because it does become super, super centralized. On top of that, it's proof of stake, which means you are gaining more money over time by staking more tokens over time by staking your amount of tokens. So I'm not really sure how the inflation curve works out. If everyone stakes, do the rich actually get richer or not? But certainly it's not helping, right? So if anything, it's making it worse or just keeping it the same, which sucks. So it's extremely centralized. Again, with only 21 block producers, I believe they had some incident a while ago where the EOS blockchain was simply not working, and what they had to do was they had to talk to all the block producers to stop producing blocks, which was hilarious. And everyone said this happened just after they released too, which was funny. I'll see if I can find the tweet for it. If I can find the tweet thread about it, I'll put it in the description. But yeah, it's centralized, obviously. So you're trusting your DApp or whatever to the centralized party. If they don't like you, they can get rid of you. They can void all of your transactions. They can void all of your addresses. It's pretty bad. So another negative is there is an insane amount of bag holders. Again, for a project of this size and scope and the amount of hype that there was in 2017 on top of the altcoin bull cycle, it's just there's so many people in EOS and people who have been bought in from $15, $10, $5. Now we're trading at $3.50. So I mean, these guys are bag holding an insane amount of EOS. If you look at the chart, there's so many resistance levels to actually hit if you're looking for any kind of bullish momentum. I mean, yeah, you're really fighting gravity here for this one. And so as an investment, again, this isn't really talking much on the actual tech part, but this is keeping in mind, again, part of my fundamental investment thesis is keeping in mind the market, keeping in mind the players in the community. And the community as it is right now for EOS is just a lot of bag holders. So third negative, Ethereum has larger network effects and dev mindshare. This one should be completely apparent to anyone who is familiar with EOS and Ethereum. Obviously, Ethereum has years behind it since 2015. Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, Vitalik Buterin likes it. Putin wants to put all his mob blood money from Russia into it. Ethereum is heads and shoulders above all of the competition in terms of dev mindshare, and so it's very, very difficult for EOS to catch up to that. Again, if you're doing a money fight, yeah, EOS has $4 billion, but Ethereum is a much larger. I would say Ethereum probably has more money than that based on their market cap. Another negative is there's lots of competition. Everybody wants to beat Ethereum. Everybody knows that that's where the money is. Everyone wants to make the next smart contract platform, the next smart contract infrastructure, and so that means that there's so much competition for this audience that not only is EOS fighting against the inertia of the bag holders and the inertia of the Ethereum community, they're also fighting all of these other recent ICOs and infrastructures and projects. So Dfinity, I mean, Tezos is another one. There's all of these Ethereum killers that are all vying for the same customer, let's say, or the same companies or the same partnerships. And so it's very difficult for EOS to truly say, Cardano's another one, for EOS to say this, EOS is heads and above better than everyone else and heads and shoulders above everyone else. This is why. And everyone will obviously go to EOS. When there's so much choice in the market, difficult to really say that you're the best. And finally, the tech is not as battle tested as Bitcoin or Ethereum. Delegated proof of stake, decently old, a few years old, but obviously has not been tested to the extent that Bitcoin and Ethereum have been tested. So obviously I am not a technical, like a coder developer type of person, but reading the white paper, it just starts to make you wonder if there's what kind of exploits could you possibly build for a system like EOS. So my final verdict, the conclusion, and I included a little Wojak in here. Sell, sell, sell. We don't like it. Sell. I'm bearish. So I don't think there's any reason EOS will outperform Ethereum, especially once Ethereum 2.0 comes out, especially once we get the sharding and plasma, which means Ethereum is going to have the decentralized aspect of Ethereum, which EOS doesn't have, and then it's going to have the scalability that EOS does have. So it's just going to be better than EOS in almost every possible way. It's going to have the dev mindshare, it's going to have the war chest, it's going to have the community, it's going to have the TPS. Really, the TPS is the only thing that's missing from Ethereum right now. And obviously a much more well-understood economic model. Well, that remains to be seen if Ethereum goes proof of stake. But generally, all those other advantages are coming into play. So I really don't think there's any reason why EOS will outperform Ethereum in the long run. There's just a lot more people working on Ethereum than there is on EOS. There's a really, really high valuation of EOS in general in terms of the market cap. The market cap right now is 3.1 or something, a billion USD, and this is an altcoin bear market, so that just goes to show you how much further south this thing can go. If you're sitting at 3 billion USD market valuation at the bottom of the bear market, I mean that's rough, right? Or not the bottom of the bear market, but during the worst bear market we've ever seen, it's really rough because it just goes to show how much more you stand to lose, especially as a holder. So if you've been holding EOS from 8 billion market cap, like, good luck, my friend, especially with that proof of stake inflation. The centralized aspects remove much of the purpose of building on blockchain. Again, they made this centralized thing and they made it really fast, and then it just goes to make you wonder why you even built this thing on blockchain in the first place. right? This just seems like it's a completely unnecessary intermediary layer if you don't have the decentralized aspect. The whole point of blockchain is that you are supposed to make this decentralized. Now, I understand the perspective of someone like Larimer trying to do this this delegated proof of stake. I do get that, but you are always giving something up when you are making these kind of sacrifices for the sake of TPS, versus something like Ethereum, where it's tackling the scalability problem in a different way, which is going to make it not nearly as centralized as you are going to have it with 21 block producers on EOS. So again, centralized aspect again removes a large selling point for any smart contract platform. I haven't really seen too much progress in EOS. I tried to look around a little bit. Again, the only thing I really could find was a Veripedia. Obviously, EOS and Block One particularly are doing a lot of grants, so there's a lot of money involved if you're a developer looking to develop on something like EOS. But again, you have to wonder, am I really going to be able to find the audience for this thing? Unless I'm making some kind of game that needs it. If so, go ahead, great. But otherwise, you're just probably only going to get that grant money. And by the way, Ethereum Foundation also gives grants, so they're competing there too. And then I just got a general impression of greed from Block One. I have seen interviews with these guys. I've seen the way that they talk towards the crypto community, about the crypto community, and just the fact that they have raised so much money. Their initial ask was $1 billion. They raised 4 times that because they had basically an uncapped sale. And they never thought, they either were stupid and didn't think that would happen, or they were greedy and they knew that it would happen and they were taking advantage of the hype in order to enrich themselves. So I'm not going to go into too much of that because that obviously is, in my opinion, a separate video. But you really have to wonder, if there's a company that's raising $4 billion, what exactly are you using that money for? What is the difference between having $4 billion and $1 billion? They're both insane amounts of money. What is the $3 billion extra dollars going to? What is it going towards? How is that helping you particularly to reach your goals? Especially when every other large project, insanely large infrastructure project, many with better teams, are doing so much more than you are with one magnitude less of a market cap, with 1 magnitude less of the money. We look at Bitcoin. Started with $0 by Satoshi Nakamoto. We look at Ethereum, $15 million ICO. Look how large Ethereum is today. EOS, for all of the money that they have gained, they have not actually produced much of anything. And on top of that, they have so much more money, but they're doing so much less even in terms of market cap. Ethereum, $15 million. Their market cap is something like $15 billion now. EOS, $3 billion, and they raised $4 billion. So it's just a lot of beleaguered holders and investors and all of that. And I think a lot of this has to do, sadly, with greed. So that's generally my conclusion and my thoughts on EOS. If you're an EOS bag holder, I'm sorry. I have no short-term prognostication of bullishness. I really don't have a short-term bias towards a bullish movement. I think middle term, there's just too much competition, and long term, this is almost certainly going to get defeated by something like Ethereum 2.0 and all of that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will be back with some more stuff. Take care. Bye-bye.